You're on the Ruslan Bailov channel, and today, June 18th, 2026, we'll break down the situation in the world together. It's been an exceptionally busy day for major events, so let's get straight to business. A quick reminder, subscribe to the channel and be sure to hit the notification bell. Unfortunately, YouTube continues to suppress analytical content on the Ukraine conflict in search and shows it less often in recommendations. So without your subscription and notifications turned on, you may simply miss new episodes. It helps the channel a great deal. Now, let's get to it. We'll begin with the conflict between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, and arguably with the loudest story of all, the massive strike directed at the Russian capital. Overnight into June 18th, the Ukrainian side carried out a large-scale strike on Moscow, using hundreds of drones. Some sources claim Ukrainian-made cruise missiles were also involved. I'll stress, however, that the use of cruise missiles remains unconfirmed at this point. To understand the full picture, we need to step back a little. In effect, the operation had been in preparation since June 15th. That's when the first warning sign appeared. Overnight into June 15th, an impact was recorded on the small town of Roitov, part of the Moscow agglomeration. Footage from the scene shows a powerful blast, presumably from a drone, and thick black smoke over the buildings. The episode went almost unnoticed at the time because that same night the Russian Federation was carrying out a far larger strike on Kiev. Over 600 aerial targets were involved, mostly drones plus dozens of missiles, and all attention was fixed on the Ukrainian capital. Already by the evening of June 15th, the Ukrainian side began to respond. Recall that on June 16th, the situation around the Moscow oil refinery was widely discussed. The first strike on it came in the early morning. In all likelihood, that's when the Ukrainian command concluded that the capital's air defenses were not operating at full capacity. Having probed the air defenses on June 15th and 16, the adversary then prepared a plan for a massive strike. June 17th brought an operational pause, the calm before the storm. No serious mutual strikes were carried out. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense reported 119 Russian drones, while the Russian ministry claimed several hundred but provided no confirming footage. And so, overnight into June 18th, pro-Ukrainian resources published the first maps showing approximate flight routes for the drones and, by their account, cruise missiles. Some targets headed for Moscow, others toward the southern regions. From around 4 in the morning, the first footage of the air battle over the capital began to appear. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, 555 drones were shot down during the night battle, though this was an interim figure as the engagement was still ongoing at the time. An important point, in the first hours, air defenses performed very effectively. Dozens of clips showed drones being downed on the approach and over the city itself. The first 2, 3, perhaps 4 waves were intercepted at nearly 100%. But then something went wrong. Whether the calculations proved faulty or the scale was underestimated, far more drones were launched than the defensive system could process. At a certain point, the air defenses stopped keeping up, and everything flying in the later waves got through almost unhindered. From that moment on, a huge volume of footage appears devoted to a single thing: drones flying toward the Moscow oil refinery, located in the southeastern part of the city. Wave after wave, the aircraft approached the facility, and each new one delivered a strike. Pro-Ukrainian resources managed to roughly geolocate the points of impact. At least 7 strike points were counted on the refinery's territory. From every district of the capital, recordings of overflights, fires, and emergency response work were published. Now, the mirror strike. Overnight into June 18th, the Russian Federation also struck Ukrainian territory, and much like the Roitov hit on June 15th, it largely stayed in the shadows. According to the Ukrainian side, 246 aerial targets were recorded as of 8 in the morning, twice as many drones as the day before. That said, it's hard to call this a massive strike in the strict sense. The threshold is generally considered to be roughly 300 aircraft and up. Missiles were used as well. By incoming reports, around 8 Iskanders and roughly 4 of Russia's new Banderol cruise missiles. Of these, by preliminary data, the bulk hit Kyiv, with several more striking a gas industry facility in Poltava. These figures remain preliminary. The Russian Defense Ministry reported in the morning that it had struck a small oil refinery and, presumably, fuel storage facilities. In Poltava region, there is footage of Ukrainian emergency services at work, and closer to midday, information began to come in that the Russian Federation is hastily preparing a new, genuinely powerful, massive strike, possibly overnight into June 19th, with hundreds of missiles and drones. Pro-Western experts are recording the relocation and regrouping of strategic aviation. Tu-95s have been brought to readiness, and preparation of Geran-type drones is being completed. The most likely target is Kyiv, once again. I'll emphasize that this is a forecast, not an accomplished fact. During the day, there were also reports of a series of strikes on the regions. In Zaporizhzhia region, a small structure was destroyed. In Dnipropetrovsk region, there is footage of the first seconds after the arrival of several Iskanders, though the nature of the target is hard to determine for now. In Sumy region, drones struck a 110 substation near Okturka. A lot of material is coming from the Sumy area. A parking lot with trucks and tractor units was destroyed. It's not out of the question that this very equipment was used to launch drones at Russian territory. That wraps up the main part on the strikes, and we move to the front line. A great many significant events were recorded over the past day, and most of them are coming from the Sloviansk-Druzhkivka agglomeration. Units of the south and center groupings continue their offensive and, by incoming reports, have substantially improved their positions. We'll start with the Kostiantynivka sector. The map has once again undergone noticeable changes. By the latest revisions, the Russian side has established near-complete control over the 81st and 92nd quarters micro-districts, as well as the Metalur micro-district. There is a high probability that pockets of resistance by AFU, Armed Forces of Ukraine, units remain in these areas, but this is unlikely to alter the overall course of the fighting. Footage published today shows new flags within the city itself. One of them was raised in the historic center of Kostiantynivka, on the boundary with the Krasny micro-district and near the central market. On the basis of these materials, one can say with confidence that the Russian side controls roughly 90% of the city, and the offensive continues. In addition, the Ministry of Defense reported that 98 buildings came under control in the Kostiantynivka sector over the past day. We move to the eastern Sloviansk direction. Today, the Russian Defense Ministry and the South Grouping announced the end of fighting for the settlement of Rai-Aleksandrovka. The battle for it lasted about 3 months, since March. A 12-minute video has been published showing the entire course of the fighting, with the finale showing Russian flags raised in the eastern, central, southwestern and northwestern parts of the settlement. On that basis, we make a revision. The Russian side has reached the last key point east of Sloviansk, Mykolaiivka. Nearby, along the Siversky Donets, lie the small villages of Starodubivka and Piskunivka. The main focus, in all likelihood, will shift to the large forested area southeast of Mykolaiivka and to the strategic heights along the river. From Rai-Aleksandrovka, the offensive will probably continue westward, including with the aim of forcing the Siversky Donets-Donbass Canal and reaching the line of Yurkivka and Orikuvatka. These points along the canal are becoming priority objectives. The Ukrainian side is publishing material on logistics in the sector. The main crossings between Sloviansk and Mykolaiivka are seriously damaged. Vehicles can no longer pass, and movement is possible by infantry only. Regarding the city of Lyman, the Ministry of Defense reported that at least 48 structures came under control over the past day. The fighting on the eastern and northeastern Sloviansk directions is likewise approaching a kind of logical conclusion. Highly interesting news is coming from the Kherson direction. Since May, heightened activity by both sides has been noted along the Dnipro. Numerous clips of aerial bombing and FPV strikes. Analysts are drawing attention to fire anomaly maps. There are several times more of them on the Ukrainian bank than on the Russian one. This indicates that the AFU have concentrated a fairly large grouping in this sector, while the Russian side is identifying positions and delivering systematic fire damage. As we've discussed repeatedly, some kind of operation by the AFU cannot be ruled out here. At the same time, the Ukrainian side had placed a major bet on disrupting logistics between Crimea and Kherson region, striking the bridges. The Russian Federation, however, moved promptly to repair the old crossings and build new ones. Satellite imagery is coming in. Over the past weeks, in the areas of Armyansk, Chonhar and Henichesk, bridges are being erected literally a few dozen meters apart, primarily pontoon crossings, and there are already quite a lot of them. The Russian side clearly understands the risks tied to logistics in the direction of the Kinburn Spit and appears prepared for possible provocations on the Crimean direction. Interesting reports are also coming from the area of responsibility of the North Grouping. By its daily report, Russian units managed to enter the settlement of Ukrainske. Fighting is also underway for Losivka. From this, one can surmise that the offensive is developing with the aim of bypassing Bilyi Kolodiaz from the rear, which could force the Ukrainian command to abandon the point to avoid encirclement. One more important direction is the Sumy sector, the area of Krasnopilia, where the Russian side is intensifying airstrikes. According to the North Grouping, units have come right up to Maiske. Fighting is now ongoing for Maiske and for Mikhailivka, and per the report, already on the territory of these small settlements themselves. Now let's step beyond the Russia-Ukraine front and turn to the Middle East, because over these very days, the so-called 2026 Iran war is moving toward a formal close. And the consequences bear directly on global energy markets and, by extension, on the Russian economy. A brief recap. The war began on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel struck a range of Iranian military targets, strikes that, among other things, killed Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei. And in response, Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz to foreign shipping. And here is the key point. In normal times, the strait carries roughly a fifth to a quarter of the world's seaborne oil trade and about a fifth of its liquefied natural gas. Its closure produced a global fuel crisis, drove prices sharply higher, and rippled across the world economy. What followed was months of brinkmanship. A US-led air campaign against Iranian targets along the strait, and an American naval blockade of Iranian ports from April 13th. Wikipedia +6. And now to Trump's deal. On June 14th, Pakistan, acting as a key mediator, announced that Washington and Tehran had finalized a memorandum of understanding, set to be signed on June 19th, intended to bring the conflict to a formal end within 60 days. Minutes later, Trump announced the immediate lifting of the naval blockade. Trump declared that the Strait of Hormuz would reopen and remain, in his words, permanently toll-free. Though it's worth noting Iran had imposed no tolls before the war, so this largely restores the pre-war status quo. The memorandum also reportedly includes a cessation of hostilities in Lebanon and a plan directing some $300 billion toward Iran's post-war reconstruction, with sanctions relief tied to clear, verifiable steps by Iran on its nuclear program. Encyclopedia Britannica +4. Now the most interesting part, how analysts assess the way this war ended for the United States, because the assessments are strikingly critical. Experts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies note that while both Washington and Tehran will claim victory, both in fact lost in important ways, and they describe the framework as lopsided. Iran secured most of what it wanted, and secured it up front, before talks on a final deal even began, while the United States got very little. Military analysts broadly conclude that Iran proved far more resilient than anticipated, and that the war's central lesson is that Iran's most powerful instrument turned out to be neither its missile arsenal nor its nuclear program, but its ability to close the Strait of Hormuz, a lever that put immediate pressure on the US and its allies. Center for Strategic and International Studies Wikipedia. The financial picture is no less telling. By some estimates, the war was burning through money faster than any conflict in American history, on the order of $11 billion in just the first 6 days. And the ripple effects are global. This month, the World Bank cut its 2026 global growth forecast to 2.5%, the lowest since the pandemic. One dimension touches our main topic directly. Throughout the crisis, elevated oil and gas prices worked in Russia's favor. So as the conflict winds down and the strait reopens, energy markets may begin to cool, and that is a factor well worth watching in the months ahead. Open War NPR. And with that, friends, we conclude today's briefing. Thank you for watching to the end. Subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, turn on notifications, and all the best to you. This has been Ruslan Belov.